course, the thing on everyone's mind stateside are the keys to the White House. They appear to be tantalisingly close for Joe Biden. Within the last few hours, the Democrat candidate has said he will win the race with a clear majority of more than 300 Electoral College votes. But Donald Trump is in no mood to concede defeat, saying he will contest the entire election process. This is the state of play with 6 states still to declare. With Alaska being reliably Republican, this race will be decided in 5 key battlegrounds. All eyes are on Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden is widening his lead after overtaking the president. The former vice president has also gained an unexpected but narrow advantage down in Georgia. They are still counting there, although it's looking increasingly likely as though there will be a recount in Georgia. Nevada, that looks set to stay blue. That's the latest from our calculations. Still counting there as well, not counted overnight in the city that doesn't sleep, Las Vegas, but in Clark County, of course. But we are expecting potentially a result from Nevada within the next few hours. Let's take you down to Arizona. Donald Trump is making gains in Arizona. Again, though, the prediction from the networks here in the United States is that Arizona will be a Democrat state going into the 2021 inauguration, and almost certainly North Carolina will remain in the red camp. Am I about right there, Alistair?
Yeah, no, very much so. I think that's a pretty good précis of where we are now. What needs to happen next is these states need to get over the line and see whether Joe Biden retains the lead, as he has got in 4 of them, or whether Donald Trump can catch up. The thing for Donald Trump that is not working in his favour is when you drill down into the data and you go from statewide into county-wide data, you can see that he's just not making up ground quick enough. So every time we get a new tranche of counted votes that are landed and published, you have to see, well, how much ground has Donald Trump made up? And almost nowhere is he making it up enough.
Okay, so all eyes, though, nevertheless, Pennsylvania, certainly for both camps, because if Biden wins it, he's over the line. If Trump wins it, he's still in the race.
There is no other way about it. If Donald Trump does not win Pennsylvania, he cannot get back into the White House. So he must win Pennsylvania, but he is some way behind. And you know where I was saying just then about Donald Trump having to catch up in various counties? Well, some counties in Pennsylvania are very pro-Biden. So we're looking around Philadelphia, for example, where Joe Biden has taken sort of 80% of the votes counted. So he's really accelerating his lead in places like Philadelphia. But take like Westmoreland County elsewhere within the state. Now that's a very sort of Republican county, and yet Joe Biden's also taking little increases there as well. And that is why, you know, it's not over yet for Donald Trump mathematically, but I mean, we're at a stage now where, I mean, some of these states like Georgia, for example, 99% of the votes counted, they're sort of hedge trimming, really. It's the last little bit before they can properly declare it. But it's very, very narrow.
Although they might have to recount in Georgia.
Georgia, they might have to recount because almost inevitably, and I only caveat because we're not 100% counted, but almost inevitably, the margin of error, the margin of victory for Joe Biden will be below 0.5%. And that means that should Donald Trump want to request a recount, he is within state law to do so.
Okay, that recount paid for by the state.
Correct.
Okay, for now, thanks, Alistair. Well, as we inch ever closer to finding out who will win the presidency across the pond, Boris Johnson and his government will be wondering what the eventual result will mean for the UK-US special relationship. Joining us now is the former British ambassador to the United States, Sir Peter Westmacott. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning, Sir Peter. What, if it is Joe Biden in the White House, what does the embassy need to do here in the United States to start rebuilding bridges?
Well, it does look like it's going to be Joe Biden, doesn't it? And I suspect that all 4 of those states you've been talking about will end up going to Biden, which, by my simple calculation, would give him 306 votes in the Electoral College, which is exactly the number that Donald Trump got last time, ironically. Anyway, we have to wait to see. But to answer your question, of course, it's been a bit difficult for the embassy and for other British government representatives to establish links with the Biden team because everybody around Joe Biden has been told, do not deal with foreign embassies and foreign governments because otherwise you're going to have Trump jumping up and down saying this is outrageous, you're colluding with foreign governments, rather in the way that his team did with the Russians before the last election. So there's been a kind of distance between even the closest allies and Team Biden, for those who are in government. I mean, those of us who are outside government have stayed in touch with our friends around the Vice President, but that's quite different. So if it turns out to be Biden who wins, they will move very quickly, I think, with the transition. You'll see some nominations quite fast from Biden as to who are going to be the senior members of his team. And I'm sure the British government will want to start reaching out to them, although they will be a little wary about dealing with any foreign government before inauguration takes place on the 20th of January, for the same reason of propriety and to avoid unnecessary criticisms from the Trump team. So that's what they will be doing. Nobody will be visiting, no senior politicians can come to try to get to know them before inauguration takes place, but I'm sure they'll be quickly out of the traps, COVID permitting, either on the phone or in person as soon as they can.
We know that Theresa May was left waiting for the phone call, although she was the first foreign leader to make it to the White House post-inauguration. One wonders what will be the first foreign trip for a President Biden? Lots of speculation that it would be to Ireland.
Normally, a new president goes to see the neighbours first, Mexico and Canada. That's just the tradition. Donald Trump went off for a very glitzy reception and sword dance in Saudi Arabia for his own reasons. Joe Biden is indeed very proud of, conscious of his Irish links. It's possible that he would go there first. Just don't know. Frankly, overseas travel, as long as COVID is the problem that is at the moment, I think is going to be probably on hold for a while. So the main question is going to be, with whom does he have the first early substantive conversations? Of course, foreign embassies, including ours in Washington, used to be judged by how successful they were at ensuring that the British Prime Minister was the first into the Oval Office. It won't be quite like that this year because of COVID, but we probably wouldn't be first in anyway, given the background of the way in which the Johnson administration has been working so closely with Donald Trump. But all that said, there's so much to do between the Brits and the Americans that I think we won't find that somehow there's a gap and that people don't want to deal with the Brits. There's just too much on his agenda, which we are, I would say, natural allies.
You say so much to do, perhaps not quite as much given that we have now left the European Union, although we would look towards security, we'd look towards Iran, the Middle East, and also Russia as well. And that is what you're referring to there, is it?
In part, but you're quite right. The first point is that for the United States government, whoever the president is, dealing with Europe is very important. And looking at the United Kingdom, they will judge our value to American interests in the context of, well, what do we bring to the table? We are outside the European Union, therefore we don't have any influence over European foreign policy, trade policy, climate change policy, and so on. And by the same token, some of the Europeans will be looking at us and thinking we're not quite as important as we used to be in Washington, which was an important part of our calling card. So I think we will be judged to some extent by our continuing influence in Europe, and who knows where that's going to go, but it won't be the same. And of course, Joe Biden is somebody who thinks that Brexit was not a good idea, either for Britain or for Europe or for American interests. So that is going to be a bit different. But yes, I had in mind that on issues like dealing with Russia, strengthening NATO, finding an international response to the rise of China, dealing with cybersecurity threats from other countries, the climate change agenda. And the United Kingdom, as we know, next year we're going to be chairing both the climate change conference in Glasgow and we're going to be the chair of the G7. And the Prime Minister wants to have a kind of meeting of leading democracies, the D10 or so it's begun to be called, which is right up Joe Biden's alley. So I think engaging with other democracies on how do we get back into the world of democracy functioning properly with due respect for rule of law and truth rather than lies, all that is something with which the Brits and the Americans ought to be able to work quite closely together.
Just before I let you go, do you have a view on the President's actions over the last few days?
Yeah, oddly enough, I do. My own sense is that it was not very presidential to say he'd won when he hadn't, and to say that the counting should stop when clearly in a democracy the counting should continue. I think that Vice President Biden played his cards better by not saying that he had won. He's still not saying that he has won, although all the indications are that way. But he thinks he is on the path to victory. And I think one of the second thing I would say about what President Trump said is that by casting doubt on the democratic process and by more or less calling his people out into the streets and saying there will be legal challenge everywhere, it is delaying the transition. It is potentially upsetting a peaceful handover of the sort that Republicans and Democrats have been really very good at in recent years. And I think disrupting democracy and encouraging people to come out into the streets to make trouble on the basis of no evidence whatever of illegal voting and cheating, I think that's unfortunate and, as Biden would say, somewhat unpresidential.
Okay, so Peter, good to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Coming up